Fellow attendees at this year's NAIDOC conference, my name is Jaz Hannell, and I am representing the Gap State High School this afternoon, as I wish to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land upon which we stand, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. Sadly, it's no secret to any of us that Indigenous Australians have traditionally been dispossessed, disrespected, and disregarded. The movie The Sapphires captures the racism and disrespect Australians' Indigenous culture has experienced, while Who Do You Think You Are, Adam Goodes highlights the effects of the stolen generations on young Indigenous Australians. Though both texts do share a common depiction of Indigenous Australians as victims of racism, Who Do You Think You Are captures a deeper and more realistic visual of oppression, as well as providing the recognition of the Indigenous community's resilience. It's texts like this that are a must-see for Australians today. Both The Sapphires and Who Do You Think You Are represent Indigenous Australians as victims of racism. Fixating on loss, Ian Darling, the director of Who Do You Think You Are, creates a moving representation of AFL star Adam Goodes, who rediscovers his culture, as well as mourns the loss of his ancestors. The past strength of Indigenous culture is acknowledged through the use of images of Adam's lost but not forgotten ancestors, as well as his ancestors' hometowns. To construct a sense of loss and despair, Darling utilizes personification, where Goodes is left to talk to his mother about her own personal experience with the stolen generation period. With the use of deprivation and loss, Darling is able to construct a form of understanding for viewers of the cruel and mourned past and current events that Indigenous Australians went through. Similarly, Wayne Blair, the director of The Sapphires, uses plot. For example, where the main young Aboriginal women were frowned upon by entering a public bar and not allowed to be served. To represent these Indigenous Australians, Julie, Gail, Kay, and Cynthia as victims of everyday racism, with the use of undermining comments towards the women throughout the whole film. Through the use of characterization, for example, when we are able to see not only the racism, but the reactions and feelings of the women that received the hatred. Determined to inform the audience about Australians' racist past, Darling and Blair effectively position viewers to see Indigenous Australians as victims of racism. Whilst both texts represent Indigenous Australians as victims of racism, The Sapphires represent them as determined, brave, and resilient, while Who Do You Think You Are focuses more on lost culture and stolen heritage. Blair uses plot, such as when the girls stand up for themselves when arguing with their fair-skinned cousins' white guests, to highlight resilience in The Sapphires. In addition, Blair uses characterization to show the resilience of the 4 Aboriginal women. It is used when the girls sing the Ngara Burra Farah song to their mother over the phone. This relates back to when they were little girls in their hometown singing in their Indigenous language. This is used to represent them as family-orientated, as they don't forget their proud Indigenous roots despite the hatred. Blair constructs a more positive representation of Aboriginal Australians as survivors. On the other hand, Who Do You Think You Are is about staying true to Aboriginal roots and overcoming racism. In contrast, Darling's documentary is more negative in its representation, as it strives to achieve the loss of Indigenous culture, using bleak and sorry words such as lost, stolen, and void. Darling fixates on past mourned events such as the stolen generation, rather than the current state of Indigenous Australians' affairs. When contrasted to The Sapphires, Who Do You Think You Are, Adam Goodes offers more of an insight into the true and tragic history of Indigenous Australia. It positions the audience to understand Australia's racist past. It also encourages them to appreciate the inspiring actions taken by Aboriginal people. In the past, texts used to represent Aboriginal people as unimportant to society. Who Do You Think You Are, Adam Goodes, and The Sapphires are similar with each other, with the fact that they both acknowledge that Indigenous Australians have been treated unfairly in the past, and still, unfortunately, to this day. The former tragically represents the first Australians as a destroyed race whose culture is no more. Presenting a more positive representation, the Sapphires also celebrates the resilience and defiance of Aboriginal people and their culture. Who Do You Think You Are? Adam Goodes, however, shows further insight into the struggles of Indigenous Australians. Watching this documentary, I was horrified by the racism of our past and present day. Adam Goodes and his family stories are inspirational.